Crossing the border from Nicaragua involved being dumped off the bus for no obvious reason to stand around in the hot sun for an hour or so. This is Costa Rica immigration. My first stop was Hotel Liberia, in its namesake town. The reason that most people visit Liberia is to make a trip to the nearby Rincon de la Vieja National Park. In the trees beside the visitor centre, there was a family of white-throated magpie jays. Here in Guanacaste province, February is the height of the dry season. This is when the trees in their leafless state come into flower. Most people visit this park for its volcanic features, such as these boiling mud pots. Along the trails there are some beautiful buttressed trees. Steam drifting through the forest indicates the volcanic nature of the area. This strangler fig on the right will eventually enshroud and kill the buttressed tree on which it's supported. Although close to the boiling pools, the streams are ice cold. Early next morning it was down to the bus station to buy a ticket for San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. Here's the bus taking a break halfway through the trip. In San Jose I stayed at Costa Rica Backpackers, a truly outstanding place. With nothing much to see in San Jose, I took the bus for the 8-hour trip down to Puerto Jimenez on the Osa Peninsula. The town lay beside the sea, with large areas of mangroves and small patches of forest. Here I found disappointingly small numbers of insects, such as this brightly coloured stink bug. As always, there were plenty of small anole lizards. The attention of this male was drawn to a nearby rival on another tree trunk. This provoked a display of his brightly coloured gular sac. Basically what he's saying is, keep away, this is my territory. After hours of fruitless searching, I eventually found something to film, a beautifully camouflaged wasp's nest attached to a tree trunk. I decided to take a closer look at the numerous bracket fungi on this fallen tree. This is where I hit the jackpot. There were dozens of brightly coloured fungus beetles chomping their way through the brackets. Nearby, the incoming tide had driven the turnstones to feed on the shore. This is the same species that you can see on British shores. I spent 3 nights at the nearby Costa Jungle hostel run by a really friendly American. When he arrived, this was a grassy paddock, but in the 15 years or so that he'd been there, he'd allowed the forest to regenerate and reclaim its former territory. At dawn next day, I was awoken by the roaring of howler monkeys in the forest nearby. The rainforest was suffering from a prolonged drought and insect numbers were scarce. This longhorn beetle is one of the few that I found. The local squirrel monkeys, which eat insects, must have been having quite a hard time. This one is searching inside this dead leaf to see if anything's hiding in there. Back in town, I spent most days in a small area of forest next to the airport and beside the sea. These black vultures have found a dead fish and have stripped it bare. Colourful flocks of scarlet macaws spend most days in trees in and around the town of Puerto Jimenez. They spend much of the day apparently quarrelling, but they mate for life, and this is probably part of their pair bonding behaviour. Down below, the stingless bees are swarming at the entrance to their nest. Here was my favourite spot, the Green Lake. Several boat-billed herons were always present. This yellow-crowned night heron is shading the water with its wings so it can spot fish without reflections. By contrast, this white ibis prefers to walk around looking for something to eat. But beware, there's danger lurking in the water. This small crocodile wouldn't be a threat, but this large one certainly could be. During the hottest part of the day, the ibises leave the water and roost in the shady forest nearby. For a change of scenery, I went down the coast to Matapalo for the day. Scrambling up the low cliffs, I reached out to move this vine out the way, and it moved. On the sandy beach below, there were thousands of land hermit crabs. These are feeding on a fallen coconut. Just offshore, the surfers were riding the waves. While above them, the pelicans were busy fishing. The forest was simply too dry to stay any longer, so next day, at 4:30 in the morning, I took the bus from Puerto Jimenez back to San Jose. After a night at the Costa Rica Backpackers, I took the one daily bus up to the Irasu volcano. The yellow flowers here are not the actual trees themselves, but a mistletoe that lives on the trees. Walking up the path to the volcano, there were plenty of wildflowers. These are Indian paintbrushes. And these turned out to be very popular with the local hummingbirds, as expected from this type of flower. These huge leaves belong to a gunnera. We grow a similar species in British gardens. This is some kind of thistle. A concrete path leads up to the lip of one of the craters. And down below is this beautiful blue crater lake. Because of the unusual period of drought, the weather up here was beautiful, bright sunshine. Usually by this time of the day, it's hemmed in here by clouds. The volcano hummingbird is only found on the tops of a few volcanoes in Costa Rica and neighbouring Panama.
Are endemic from here and also in Panama as well.
The hummingbirds visit the flowers in the correct way and thereby pollinate them.
It likes those orange flowers.
I think that is a female.
Yeah.
By contrast, the slaty flowerpecker bites the base of the flowers and robs them of their nectar. The sparrow-like Volcano Junco is another bird endemic to these volcanoes. Unfortunately, you only get 2 or 3 hours before you have to take the one and only bus back to San Jose. Back in San Jose, strolling in a plaza near the hostel, I spotted these red Lord Amazon parrots. In a desperate search for some rain in the rainforest, I took the bus down to Puerto Vieja to set up a key, a place I've been to twice before, and it really did rain. I stayed at Cabinas Laura, which mainly caters for truck and van drivers. When I said I wanted to film insects, monkeys and other animals, they said, "Oh, why don't you look out the back?" Much to my amazement, they opened a door right next to the TV, and lo and behold, there was a suspension bridge going across a small stream and into their own private piece of forest. Gathering my equipment together, I walked across the bridge for the first time. This is the view back towards the hotel, showing how close it is, and just beyond the hotel is the main street of the town. Although only tiny, the forest was typical of the area, with lobster claws, heliconias, brightly coloured fruits, big buttress trees, and a sort of big, broad, shiny leaves typical of many rainforest plants. I couldn't figure out what this was at first, jerking around into forest. Then I realised it was a squirrel's tail. I ended up spending 5 days in this tiny piece of forest. On day 2, the local group of black howler monkeys turned up. Unlike many monkeys, which often eat insects, howlers subsist entirely on a diet of leaves. These are not particularly nutritious, and they have to eat a lot of them, and they have a special stomach, rather like cows, in order to digest them and get any goodness out of them. Here's a female carrying a baby. Instead of being just plain black, the boss male has a tawny back, bright yellow tail, and an enormous and very prominent pair of testicles. When you depend on a diet of leaves, you have to devote a lot of time each day just to eating to get enough goodness inside you. As dusk approaches, these butterflies appear. Even here, in this famously wet area, there had been no rain for months and the forest was very dry. There were disappointingly few insects. However, next day, I did get lucky in that the squirrel had returned to the same banana tree. But this time he was busy scent marking the leaves with glands situated underneath his chin. You'll see in a minute he'll come down, waggling his face from side to side as he marks the leaf. pauses for a moment, and then down we come. Then he finishes the job off with a final spray of urine. Later that afternoon, the howler monkeys returned and crossed the bridge right outside the rear door of the hotel. Here's a big old male cuddling one of his wives. See how fearless they are. This monkey's coming straight towards me, standing there with the camera on a tripod. These large, transparent butterflies live only in the shadiest parts of the rainforest floor. Just above, in the lower understory, lives this lizard, beautifully camouflaged. Generally, he spends all day just sitting still, waiting for an insect or some other item of food to come within range so it can snap it up in its jaws. As I spend more and more time filming it, it begins to get used to me. But it really can't be bothered by now. I'm moving the camera around at close range. It's just watching me, has no fear. Even shaking the plant fails to elicit any response at all. This is because its normal enemies would rush in and grab it straight away without any preliminaries. It's not just squirrels that are attracted to bananas. This olive-backed euphonia likes them too. While fallen fruit attracts the cherries tanager, a very common bird in Costa Rica. One afternoon, one of the staff shouted to me that there was a large iguana sitting just outside the kitchen door. It was a beautiful, spectacular old male. He's well over a metre long, but although he looks fierce, he's a harmless vegetarian. Like all iguanas, he's a good tree climber. With their brilliant red eyes and pictured wings, these are male Richard's flies. They're feeding on some unknown liquid. Richard's flies are typical of the shady rainforest understory. This is a female. Just look at her beautiful patterned eyes. And then, just 2 metres away from the Richard's flies, I found this paper wasp chopping up a caterpillar. The very tiny black flies milling around are jackal flies. These often accompany predators, hoping to jump in for a share of their prey. The larger fly with the red eyes is taking a risk, because one of the wasps could easily attack it and kill it. Once again, here I just got lucky. This giant clip beetle is laying its eggs on the bark of a tree right beside the bridge, just where I could see it. This is huge compared with any click beetles found in Europe or North America. More than 3 centimetres long. After finishing laying eggs, she moves off up the tree, looking for another place to lay another egg. To give you an idea of how close to the town all this wildlife activity is taking place, this is the main street, and there's our patch of forest, which runs all along one side of the town. After a few days, because of the ongoing drought, I decided to head for the National Park of Cahuita, which is renowned for its abundance of animal life. So I took the bus to Limon, changed buses, and ended up in Cahuita.